Coach, hey, thanks for joining me today on this simple coach-to-coach interview. Do appreciate us finally connecting, and I'm thankful that you're here today.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Thank you for having me on.
Anytime. So, well, you might want to take that back until the end of it. The hot seat gets quite hot.
Verdict's still out.
Yeah. I don't smoke anymore, so I can't burn cigarettes on your hands or anything. So, hey, you're a rookie.
Yep.
So you're new to this. So I usually just start out. Can you just talk a little bit about your soccer journey and then ultimately how you ended up at a fine institution like Case?
Yeah, so all throughout my childhood, growing up, high school, all of that, soccer was kind of always my biggest passion. You know, when you're younger, you play all these different sports, but soccer was the one that always kind of was, closest to my heart. Absolutely loved it. I knew, obviously, by the time I got to high school that I definitely wanted to pursue, a career in it, and like as far as like collegiately. And so I also knew, though, I valued my education. And so I was really looking at institutions that valued both athletics and academics. And so, throughout the process, obviously looked at different levels, things like that, just trying to keep my mind open, but then ended up at Lafayette. And, it was definitely an interesting experience, I would say. It's one that I think actually pushed me most to become a coach. I think I've had a lot of great coaches over my time, some that I don't really speak to anymore for certain reasons, and ones that obviously, I got married in 2023 and they were at my wedding and wouldn't have, wanted it any other way. And so, I think my collegiate experience is the one that really, really pushed me to want to get into college coaching. I had been coaching since I was in high school. My high school coach actually ran a club. He got me involved in it, was a great mentor, and provided me that opportunity. And then, obviously was able to continue to do that in the summer through camps or youth, teams in the summer, and really enjoyed it. And then going through college and having experience that I wish was maybe a little bit different is what honestly made me want to get into coaching and kind of give back to the sport that gave so much to me. And so I started, really kind of looking at different, opportunities, things like that. And then after graduation, I was doing some private training sessions. I was working with, somebody that I met through Summer League who he had ran his own, Perfect Touch Soccer is what it's called. So I was running that. I was coaching another youth team, doing some side stuff until my club coach from FC Bucks, Rick Brownell, had said that he was looking for an assistant coach. And Arcadia is a pretty good academic school as well outside of Philly. And so he, hired me there and was there for a good year, and it was a great opportunity to dip my toes into everything. And from there, I knew I wanted to get my master's degree. And then Seton Hill kind of presented itself and got that job and was there for 2 years. And again, worked under another, good and highly successful coach, great mentor to me. And so had a good 2 years there. And then after that, I was kind of like, what am I going to do? Do I want to be a head coach? Do I want to be assistant coach? I really honestly didn't want to be a head coach at the time, but it was kind of odd because all of the opportunities I was getting were for head coaching roles. And I think that's what kind of made me open my eyes a little bit more to maybe this is if this is what I'm getting and this is, the opportunities that are coming to me, then maybe I got to be a little bit more open-minded to it. And, my, boyfriend at the time, who's now my husband and stuff, he coaches as well. So he was always somebody that I leaned on, throughout this whole, process. Met him at Seton Hill, been with him through Bethany and obviously now. And, when I interviewed at Bethany and stuff, he was like, it's a head job. It's going to be a great opportunity and things like that. And so I think he made me be a little bit more open-minded to that, and got Bethany and was there for 5 years. And then, was just kind of ready for something else. And when Case presented itself, I really didn't, I didn't expect it. I had applied for the job, when it was open a couple years before that, and knew maybe at that time I wasn't really ready for it. But then when it opened this time around, I was like, I was super excited. I was really hopeful about the opportunity, and obviously, here I am. So
I have nightmares about Bethany, and it has nothing to do with
why would that be?
because
The roads
they
or
no, no, no. The grass field. I don't know if it's still
oh,
played on
oh yeah, it is.
the
Yep,
bowl.
the bowl. Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, my first experience was going down that hill and warming up, and there weren't a lot of people, and then
Yeah,
starting to hear this drum
yeah,
bang that get closer and closer and closer, and
yep,
all these students started coming down. That's when they were really the men's team was really
yep.
really good.
Yeah, I've heard
So
a lot of good stories about, when
yeah,
they obviously had their big runs, won the
yeah,
national championship and years
championship.
after
Yeah,
that. But the bowl is a really, really pretty field. It's one that I
yeah,
know
yeah,
when I was there, we were trying to say, like, what can we do to keep this in great
yeah.
shape, to spruce it up a little bit? And I know the coaches that are there now, I know that's a big push too, because it is so unique and it
Oh,
is a really cool environment. Yeah.
fantastic.
But
Yeah, yeah.
usually
If you
people
get
comment on
students
the
there, it's
road
fantastic.
if they say
Yeah,
scary.
yeah.
So.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, because I saw some games that you guys play on the football in
Yep.
the football stadium. It's probably because it gets damp. I mean, it
It
does.
does,
It's a
yeah.
bowl, so
Yeah,
it
there were
does
some
get.
drainage issues when I was
Yeah,
there that if it rained the day before heavily or the
yeah,
day of, it was like, you're going to tear it up. So we would
yeah,
shift
yeah,
sometimes, yeah.
yeah. So, what? I mean, was there anything in particular that you saw at Case, like wanting to come to Case, or
Yeah.
was it just sort of like, hey, it's a natural progression? I'm at Bethany, so why don't I take a look? And what are all the job? Like, hey, I'm
Yeah.
just going to do a shotgun, or was it something about Case in particular?
Yeah, no, it was definitely about Case in particular. My husband and I both coach, so it's not easy for us all the time to pursue our
Right.
dreams while still figuring life out together. But he was in Nebraska for a period of time, and then he ended up actually like he's the head coach for men's basketball at Bethany now, and
Mm-hmm.
so he had just gotten the job in March of 23, which we got
Mm-hmm.
married in June of 23,
Right.
and I had kind of told myself, and we had kind of agreed that, when the time comes, I'm only going to look for jobs in a certain region, only certain jobs that are,
Mm-hmm.
going to be, challenge me in different ways and things like that. He's actually from Cleveland. And so that
Oh,
was one of the biggest draws is that we wanted to be by, selfishly, we wanted to be by one of our families. I'm from
yeah.
an hour and a half north of Philly. Originally, he's from Cleveland. And I think I always had a desire to kind of make a new place my own. I absolutely love where I'm from. I love Easton. I'm a huge Eagles fan, so I'm all for that. But I do really like a lot that I've found out about Cleveland. It's a
Mm-hmm.
major city, but it's not quite as crazy as a lot of other
Yeah,
major
yeah,
cities with traffic
yeah.
and stuff. And we, again, Case is 30 minutes from his family, and so that was a
Mm-hmm.
huge draw. But also, obviously, the level of academics, the level of athletics here, the conference itself. Like, there's just a lot of draw.
Yeah.
The students here, they want to compete in all aspects of life. I myself, when I was going through my college process, I wanted high academics while also playing at, a higher level that was going to
Mm-hmm.
challenge me. And so those are some of the reasons that I landed at, Lafayette. And then, you know, seeing Case come up, I've really liked the work life balance and kind of what Division III gives you. And so I
Mm-hmm.
knew I wanted to stay at this level, and it was kind of too good of an opportunity to not go hard for. So
Yeah.
it was a little bit of everything, I think, with the draw.
Is your husband still at Bethany? He's
Yep.
still a basketball
Yeah.
coach?
Yep.
And you're in Cleveland? Can I
Yep.
ask you the dumb question?
No,
What do you
you're
like,
totally.
sort of live in between them
So
both?
we do not. He lives in like the Weirton area. We had bought a house there, which we were fully aware of. We could be buying a house and then maybe moving in a bit, but
Right.
we'd rather do that than kind of throw money away in an
Mm-hmm.
apartment. And we've rented it out at once, to a roommate
Right.
or two at a time. So he lives there, and I live in Tremont, actually, so in Cleveland technically.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of commute back and forth a little bit.
Oh,
So
okay.
depending on the time of year, I might be putting in a little bit more legwork than him and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a dumb
Yeah,
question. We get a lot of people that, especially those that aren't in athletics, that look at us and they're like,
yeah,
we don't
yeah,
understand. Like, you're getting, because if he didn't get Bethany, then he would have still been in Nebraska and would have flown in for our wedding and then
Yeah.
flown back after our
Back out.
wedding.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So we have a lot of people that don't understand athletics too, and like kind of how the like job market
Yeah.
works and stuff, and
Yeah.
look at us sideways. So it's not, we've gotten all the different questions. So
I just yeah, because I know did work um out in that area, and I went to Mount Union, so I
yeah,
know,
yeah,
and Cleveland, and so I
yep.
it's like like I'm just kind of trying to do the math, like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah,
um
it's we've done worse distance wise, and honestly, it hasn't been terrible.
yeah,
There's always like when I'm ending my season and he's starting his, so that like October, November, it gets crazy.
chaotic, yeah, yeah,
So it depends. Like this spring, there will be a month or two where I'm in spring season and he's recruiting and I'm
yeah,
recruiting, so
yeah,
it'll be
yeah,
hectic
totally,
then. But
yeah,
it
yeah,
hasn't been terrible.
yeah.
So,
Oh, that's good, that's
yeah.
good. What's been your biggest surprise about Case
Oh my
coming from Bethany?
God.
So let me just caveat: Bethany, for anyone who knows, is like on
Mhm.
the side or on the top of a mountain hill.
Mhm.
It is quite the walk. You do a lot of heavy breathing when you're walking from one end of the campus
You
to the
gotta be in
other.
shape, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. To where Case is, which is in a pretty cool part of Cleveland,
Mhm.
downtownish. It's a very, I don't want to call it urban, because I think
Yeah.
urban, you think of downtown Philly or New York City, and it's not. But it is. You know you're in a
Yep.
densely populated area.
Yeah. Biggest surprise. I don't know if this is a big surprise and this is something that's like really specific, but the thing I did not think about with going from Bethany to Case was paying for parking. That is like the one thing that I was like, when they hit me with like, hey, you got to get it. It's either you try and find street parking and kind of risk it, on a daily basis, or you pay for the, parking garages. I was like, oh, I didn't really think about that.
Yeah,
Like
there is no pay for parking
yeah,
in Bethany. That's
um,
for sure.
so in like kind of like an off topic,
Yeah.
specific thing of what surprised me was definitely that. That was like in the first 2 days of being here. But I think Bethany and Case are honestly really polar opposite in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Location, size,
Yeah.
kind of the people that go there typically. And so it has been, I'm trying to kind of reframe things, like reframe recruitment, obviously,
Hmm.
reframe how, certain conversations I have. But in all honesty, I think the biggest surprise, even though it's kind of not a surprise, like the individuals that are coming here are highly driven. They do a lot of different things. They're involved in clubs and sororities, and they're you know running their own research and all this
Yeah.
stuff. But I think the coolest thing for me in the transition was how like mature they were emotionally, in the sense of our first team meeting, we didn't really get the opportunity to meet many of them over the summer because we got hired.
Hmm.
I got hired in June. My assistant Ross got hired in July. So there were a couple that were on campus or local that we had maybe grabbed lunch with. But our first team meetings, our first day on move-in, we're meeting a lot of them. And our senior class was like, hey, coach, like we would love to stay after this meeting and just talk with you, right? And so we're like, okay, didn't know what to expect. And they all sat there and they were like, coach, like, what do you guys need from us? Like, what can we
Hmm.
do to help? We know that this is a transition for you. And it was kind of just really incredible, to be honest. I'm
Hmm.
supposed to be your resource, right? Not that I don't learn from my athletes on a daily basis. I 100% do. And I love that about, this profession. But I just didn't expect them day one to have kind of that, wherewithal to be like, hey, like we know this place, we know that they're new, that's totally fine. But in order for us to kind of be on the same page, we know that like we need to do what we can to support them. What do they need from us? And let's get ahead of that day one. And so I think for me, that was such a welcome surprise, and something
Hmm.
that I really haven't experienced at any other place that I've worked at, either, club, college, or just even as a player, that kind of just that leadership from day one
Yeah.
from
Yeah. Yeah. I think you see that, or at least my conversations, you see that at the high academic
them. Hmm.
schools that just, right. I mean, they're there for a reason. They're a lot more
Yep.
driven. I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just
Yeah.
the way they are. These students are, and what the school that they recruit from. Um, what surprised you from aside from that, from a soccer perspective? Were you surprised with the level? How was the level when you showed up? I mean, did that grab your attention at all?
I mean, I knew it was going to be a shift, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I was at Seton Hill, like we scrimmaged Carnegie Mellon, I knew the level. I guess I just didn't, I don't know, like, the conference is challenging and things like that, but going through it the first time, you always learn different things. I think it's just really, really exciting to be in a conference where, every single game, like, it's pretty well coached. You're
Matters.
getting, yeah, it matters. It's a little bit more like you always talk to football coaches and they're like, oh, well, other sports are different because every game we play matters because they don't typically have a
Yeah.
non-conference schedule. And for us, it's a little bit more like that. We don't have a conference tournament. It's very different from that. So it's kind of you're hoping that you either do enough to win the conference
Mm-hmm.
outright or then you're qualifying for NCAAs. And I think it's just you get so many different coaching styles, I think, in the UAA, different formations, and it's fun, it's dynamic, it's challenged me in ways that I just didn't know if I was totally like expecting right away. Where you're getting a lot more like you're thinking outside the box in different ways. I think the way we scout here and stuff like that has been a big shift from what I've done at Bethany in a good way. I definitely think like they're always hungry for more information. There's always ones that want clips. There's ones that
Mm-hmm.
want the paper scout or things like that. But it's really cool to know that they're like asking for more because I think some other times, there's always some players everywhere you're at that get overwhelmed by too much information. But here, sometimes they're like, we want literally everything you could tell us. So
Yeah, yeah. All right, this might be a loaded question, but it's based on your entire schedule. I mean, you played what, 4 or 5 nationally ranked teams, all UAA
yeah,
teams. I mean, your conference is
yeah,
ridiculous.
yeah.
Um, but are you surprised that WashU won national championship, or was it?
Nope.
I hate to say painfully obvious.
I think playing them, they were a team where I think if you were to watch our game against them, our first half and second half were totally different teams. Our
Mm-hmm.
first half, we kind of like, I think a little bit, we're like, this is WashU, like they're number
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
They've barely been scored on, and it showed.
Mm-hmm.
And they were out for blood. Anytime we showed a little bit of whatever, they were going to take advantage, and they did. And it was frustrating because I think in the second half, like we were a different team and we were,
Mm-hmm.
taking it to them in moments, like obviously scored a goal, which is not something a lot of teams could
Yeah,
say this year. But after that game, seeing their consistent results, like obviously like having watched film from them, my assistant and I had talked about it and I said, there's absolutely no way they don't win this.
yeah,
And you look, you look at their whole tournament run, right? And their closest game that they have is another UAA team, right? And
yeah,
it really doesn't surprise me. I guess it just I was, I guess, sometimes a little surprised at the fact that how dominant it was, if that makes
yeah,
sense. But
yeah, yeah.
yeah, it doesn't. They're a well coached team the way they play. I think if having a freshman come in like Olivia and making that impact, she pounced on any opportunity. And
Yeah.
again, I just think they were just a well-oiled machine. And
Yeah.
obviously for us, I think we had a lot of kinks to work out this year, which naturally you do with a coaching transition. But
Yeah.
yeah, it didn't shock me at all. I would have put money on it.
They were good, and they always surprised me is how purposeful they were.
Hmm.
Right, and I kept saying, and from early first couple games, I'm like, that's they that loss in the final last year stung,
Oh yeah,
and
yeah,
there was something about it that was just like that's what they needed, and they just kind of knew.
yep,
I had been saying all along that they were the best team in the country. I
yep,
think just by a lot. But so,
yeah.
but anyhow, always interested to hear different perspectives. Tell me about your experience in the UAA. What was that like? Like I said, it is a gauntlet of a
Mhm.
conference. Five teams nationally ranked at one point. 4 teams. I can't remember. But
Yeah.
what was that experience like? Very different from what you go through at Bethany for the last 5 years. How was
Yeah.
that on you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just crazy to think how tough of a schedule it is. It's such a shift mentally with that, where it's, it is different, right? And when we go into UAA play, a lot of us typically only play that game once a week and don't typically have non-conference. It's not like
Yeah.
we're playing Wednesday, Saturdays as much anymore. We're typically playing maybe just that one game. I would say for the most of us do that typically, and it's different. You have a whole week to prep. It's just kind of a different mindset of how you approach practices a little bit, with like how you're doing maybe film from the previous game. How are you handling scout? What are we doing a prep? I think we did a lot more of like, really breaking down our formation, breaking down their formation. I think towards the end of the year, that's something that we ended up finding out, like what our team really responded well to, and obviously like what, how we could organize a practice to get the most out of it and make them the most prepared, which, being the first year and us adjusting to them and them adjusting to us, it obviously took a little bit of time. And I think it took us until, probably midway through UAA play to start to get down. Like, these are the things that we really need to focus on a little bit more with us. And I think it is a little bit more focused on their style, like everybody's style of play and how they do it, right? And what they're going to exploit, where I don't necessarily think at Bethany that's what I was focusing on much going into each game. I'm definitely a lot more focused on just us as a team and like what each individual had to do, as opposed to, at Case, like we have to be such a unit in order to execute on both ends. And we ended up shifting formations at times and seeing what worked well against some teams and what didn't. And so I think that's kind of shifted like our off-season thinking of like, what do we really want this, like, how do we want to grow as a program? What can we do? Like, we shifted to a 3-5-2 in moments, and I think in certain moments it worked really well. And I think in other moments, maybe it didn't. But now we're kind of figuring that out and figuring out that, having these different playing styles or ways that we need to move the ball, it's going to make the difference. Our team is, I think, overall very, very technical. That was something that I didn't expect them to be as well-rounded, like in their technical ability as an entire unit as they were. And so now we're trying to figure out how can we diversify that, though. I love that. We don't want to lose that. But now what can we do to kind of be a little bit less like of a one-trick pony in some ways?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So it's interesting, right? Because you have the experience that not a lot of other coaches get, because of obviously you're in the UAA, where your first half of the season is the traditional Division III out of conference schedule.
Yep.
Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday you're playing, and then you're playing Saturday, and then you're repeating that for 4 or 5 weeks, and then you do 6-7 weeks of just playing on the weekends
Yep.
for the UAA. How do you, as a coach, how do you like that whole week of not playing? And
Yeah.
maybe I should ask that from a player's perspective, but
Yeah. Yeah.
just from the right, because now I would think now you have this time where it's like, hey, we just played, we can do some recovery, we can
Yeah.
drive right into the tactical aspects of the game, improve in some, right? Like, talk a little bit about that. Is that something that you liked? Because I keep saying
Yeah.
we want to do that for everybody, right? Like, we
Yeah.
want to figure
Yeah.
out a way to stretch the schedule. Anyhow.
Yeah. So I would say the only con sometimes about it is that it can at times feel very long in between games at times. But I think, especially being, with all of the other things that our students are involved in, with how the classes are and stuff like that, I think it's welcome from that aspect of, we have nursing majors, we have engineering majors. So they all have like different hours or different, labs and things like that, that certain days of the week could make things a little bit more challenging to get an individual session in or get things like that in. And so from that aspect, from a recovery aspect, like you said, that's huge. The fact that I can kind of be like, okay, we really can not stress as much if somebody needs to take a day off. obviously you're going to give them the day off, but you get a little bit more maybe leeway in the fact that you're like, well, it's not like we're turning around and playing in 2 days again. So you taking a day off, your body needs it. We're going to give it to you, but it's not like you're missing so much though, and it's hindering the team. Like they're still missing things, but there's obviously ways we can incorporate them, or they can go do their treatment and then come and watch when we're breaking things down. But I definitely think it allows for more of that, which is huge, right? And then from the standpoint of breaking down our own film and breaking down the film of who we're playing, we're able to spend more time on analyzing those things, like reflecting on ourselves. What are these changes we have to make? It's not like you're playing Saturday, you have Sunday recovery, Monday you're kind of still recovering, right? And then Tuesday you're pregame, you're maybe going over a thing or two and then hopping right back in it. So I definitely think from that aspect, it's welcomed. I love it. It's definitely great. And you kind of just realize like things that maybe in the past, like when it's the beginning of the season, you're throwing things together. Sometimes you're going home after spending a full day and watching film until midnight, 1 a.m. just to make sure you have stuff for the next day so they're prepared, and things like that. So it's definitely like from the balance, I think, of their work, their student life balance, our work life balance, recovery, all that stuff. I definitely think it's great. But there are some times I'm sure that it's like it just feels kind of long because you're not used to it, It's also crazy to think that when you're playing club, it's like you're playing 4 games in like 2-3 days sometimes. So it is such a switch up, but obviously, especially like within our conference, like every game matters that much. So it is, it is really nice to have that balance, especially with our travel too. That's the other thing where it's like, it's not like you're just driving to games now. Now you're driving to the airport, flying, driving again, and that is exhausting.
Well, you do trade one set of issues for another, right?
Exactly.
Like the travel, unless something radically changes, you're never going to get away from that unless you can host every game. But
which is fun, but it does get tiring sometimes. It's a different kind of wear and tear on your body.
Can I ask, like, did you, as compared to the first half of the season out of schedule versus the second half, the in conference, like, did you have a lot of, or did you have any like soft tissue injuries, pulled muscles, that sort of thing? I'm just thinking from the rest perspective, right? In the second half, when generally people are more tired because the season has gone on for so long, and now you have this.
To be honest, we had kind of a typical amount, I would say, of like soft tissue injuries. You always have a couple pulls here and there. I don't think I've ever been through a season anywhere where you don't have some of that. To be honest, our team was a little beat up this year, but most of our injuries were like contact related. We had a broken wrist. We had somebody that got fouled and hurt her knee. We had another one that fell and hurt her. Like it was more so things like that, I would say, that we had this year. But maybe that's something I should pay more attention to moving forward. I'm sure that maybe that's something that our athletic trainer, Lauren, has a little bit better insight of if she's noticed a consistent difference, especially if she might like sport to sport, because obviously like basketball, they still play 2 games a week. They're just playing Friday, Sunday. So I don't know. Maybe there is a significant difference between like our sport when we're in that back half than the first. So maybe I'll pay attention to that a little bit more.
I actually think that you guys are onto something, the UAA. Like I just think, and it makes you wonder about the conference tournament, right? Do you really need a conference tournament? If you don't have a conference tournament, can you stretch out the season? Again, just thinking player health, safety, all those things. Like the midweeks could be killers. Like just from a physical, mental standpoint, you do those enough throughout a season, they're just hard to recover. Recover from.
Not having a conference tournament is definitely different. I still think that's something that it's something more to play for, right? Obviously, right now, our conference has done so well that what we're playing for in postseason is the NCAA tournament. But most conferences don't have that, right? So I think that aspect, like I I totally get having a conference tournament. Like, I think that's something that, I think if we did it like a top four just to have it, it would be interesting because I do
Yeah.
think on most given years, anybody can upset anybody on
Sure.
any day. And I
Yeah.
think that excitement is always fun and it's always cool
Mm-hmm.
from probably the player experience standpoint for
Mm-hmm.
sure. But that's the benefit of the UAA from the last 2 years, right? 7 of the 8 teams have made it. And so you're playing for a little bit something different. But who knows? That could shift, and maybe it's not
Yeah.
that case in a couple years.
Yeah. 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 Just an
Yeah.
interesting thought analysis of sort of how the UAA is structured.
Hmm.
Were Was there any point during the season where you were like, either the team is getting it and what you want to do, or that you just felt like you were further away from what you wanted
Hmm.
to accomplish?
I think we had a little bit of both throughout the year at different
Mm-hmm.
times. I
Yeah.
think we kind of got off to a pretty good start, right? Had a pretty big win to start, and then our trip to Seattle was great. You're playing two tough opponents in
Yeah.
Pacific Lutheran and Puget Sound, and I think we were obviously, I think, as a team, a little disappointed we didn't win both because I think we should have. We faced resilience. We were, I think, playing really well, and then kind of let in a goal or two against Puget Sound and started to panic a little bit. And so that was something that was like, oh, like I didn't expect us to kind of freak out as much in that game as we did, but I think we just had things to work through. And then Pacific Lutheran, like obviously with all that travel, playing back to back, like it being a new
Yeah.
like place we're playing and stuff for us to go down and find a way to tie the game, even though I think, at times we probably had a little bit better of the play.
Mm-hmm.
I was, happy about, but then we kind of hit that rut where we're not getting results. We're tying
Yeah.
games. We're
Yeah.
tying games and not playing to the level that we should be playing at. And, creating opportunities, but not putting them in the back of the net. And that definitely
Mm-hmm.
lingered on through conference play a little bit as well. And so I think we had a little bit of like ups and downs where you had a good game or two and you're like, we're clicking. And then we kind of reverted back. And again, I think, it was kind of a little bit of first season, again, figuring things out. Injuries played a hand in that a couple times where then we're trying to fill spots and stuff like that. But then, I think at the end of season, kind of how we ended with the Skidmore game and the Messiah game, all in all, I was really, really proud of how that ended. And I think, like, in that moment, I think a lot of us, I know, like, Coach Ross and myself were both kind of like, okay, like, the season had ups and downs, but I'm kind of really, really glad with where we left off. I think it left a
Mm-hmm.
little bit still, like, we left it all out in the field, but I think it gave us a little bit more fuel going forward. I think the fact that we were able to connect and score so many goals against Skidmore and also kind of then go back and forth and we didn't panic and we still found a way to, grind out that
Yeah.
win, I think spoke about some of the growth that we went through. And then obviously playing Messiah, a team that probably has the most wins, NCAA tournament wins, obviously, and is an experienced team with a coach that's been there for years. So they are a well-oiled machine. They know what they are and they know what they're good at. To be able to challenge them the way that we did, even with being beat up and having an injury
Mm-hmm.
or two in that game, I just think I was like, in those moments, I think is when we were kind of like, okay, like things started to
Yeah.
click. Did we want more out of that season? 100%. But at the same time, I think it was kind of it was a fair ending with
Yeah.
what we had and what we gave in those games and everything.
Yeah.
So.
How much do you attribute that sort of like the waviness of the season for you to you being a rookie, respectfully?
Um, yeah, I mean,
you,
I
you
don't
know?
know if it's I mean, I'm sure there's a little bit, right? Because we're still
Mm-hmm.
figuring it out, but I think it's more so just the new coach with new team, more so
Yeah.
than, anything else. And so,
Mm-hmm.
I think it was a little bit of that, a little bit of, I haven't really seen any of you play before, except for if I've watched some film, which, I did a little
Mm-hmm.
bit, but we were a completely different team than the years prior. Obviously, like
Yeah.
the team's had a lot of success in the last 5 seasons.
Graduated a
So,
lot last year
yeah,
too, right? Yeah.
so yeah, so we've had different personnel. We had to figure things out. We had to juggle some injuries. But I think
Hmm.
at the end of the day, it's going to make us better. And I'm not, I'm grateful for that because I do think, there's always trial and error. There's always a learning curve. And I think, we had to realize that as a team. And sometimes I think, we were all kind of like, we don't have the time to do this because we want to reach
Hmm.
our goals. But, and, but yeah, I think it's more so just that transition. There's always a little bit of like it's a new institution, so you got to figure things out. It's a new conference, like you don't know your opponents yet and what they
Hmm.
do. Um, so yeah,
Yeah. Hey, you said you came on board in June?
yep,
Is that what you said?
yep,
June. So you had 2 months to get ready?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
basically two
hmm
months, well, a month and a half. No, June, July,
yeah, about two.
and part of 2 months, 2 months. Can I ask? Like, and it's not like
hmm
like you're going to Case, right? Like Case has a long history of success, and there's, I, there, I got to believe there's a little bit of certain expectations around how the team performs.
hmm
Like, would you say this might have been like your most, I mean, challenging coaching? And I don't mean because of the team or what, just because you had so little time to prepare.
Um, I don't know if I would say most challenging. I think it was just challenging in different ways. When I got hired at Bethany, I got hired in, I think my start date was June 17th. So it was actually about 2 weeks
Yeah,
later than when I started
yeah.
here. And when I started at Bethany, I thought my roster size was 16, 17, and quickly found out I was down to 10. So
Oh
I
my
would
gosh.
say, yeah, it was definitely a little bit different of a transition. And so
Yeah.
I think they just brought really different challenges in that. And so, like, at least I was prepared from the standpoint of I've been hired kind of in this timeline before. Obviously, like when I was going through Bethany, I was a first time head coach at the college level. And so we were, fighting for different things and trying to scramble to figure out different things at Bethany, which I think in some ways was a little bit more challenging from the standpoint of I didn't know if we were going to have enough bodies to put, a full season together.
Yeah.
So, we were able to kind of, make that work, find some people that were dual sport, or wanted to be, and things like that. But obviously, like, it's not the easiest. It would be way better to come in the spring and have a time to
Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of transition, coach them,
Yeah.
understand their habits, who they are, have that summer. So it's definitely kind of a sped up process, um, but it's I don't know. Yeah, it brings different challenges, but
Yeah.
it's not easy. But yeah, you're still trying to, you're getting here, you're ordering gear, you're figuring things out. Like people are asking you, like your players are asking you certain questions, and you're kind of like,
I have
please,
no
mom, like,
idea. I will figure that out.
yeah, yeah. Nobody's told me about that yet. Or, I literally started because I think some of the confusion too was like the post went out announcing me in maybe May, but I didn't actually start here until June. And so there were things that I couldn't get answers to until then. And
Right.
so, but I had started meeting the team like kind of in that period a little
Hmm.
bit where I could have some conversations and stuff like that to get to know them. But, there were just some things that kind of had to be put on hold. You're thrust into it and you're like, we're behind in recruitment for our senior class.
Yeah.
Our recruitment in high academic schools and in our conference, I think operates a little bit more on a timeline of like a scholarship level
Yeah.
institution because of it.
Yeah.
And so I think that was one of the hardest challenges besides getting to know the players and acclimating to that was we're behind and we, threw two ID camps together and, figured things out like that because we're like, I need to see people as soon as possible.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
those, I think those are the challenges and the recruitment aspect is still kind of one that we're facing because our timeline has been super stretched and was delayed because
Hmm.
we didn't get to go to those tournaments beforehand. So
Yeah.
we're seeing them over the winter
Yeah.
timeline to see some of these, kids.
So, I mean, and your thoughts around the spring? Like, how big of a deal is that going to be for you this spring?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us right now, it's huge. I mean, I think every coach has a different approach to it, right? Obviously, we need the players to be fit to a certain level, but at the end of the day, like it's really going to matter what they do with that in the summer. I think for us, we are obviously like teaching them a little bit different ways, like style of play, right? And in the fall, like we had some time to break it down, but now we're going to have time to sit down, break it down better, focus on it, talk about, triggers for certain things. What do they look like, instead of kind of doing hey, like, basically we were doing a semester's course in an 8-week course. It felt, in like a half term course. That's kind of what it felt like in the fall. But now we're kind of having that little bit of that extension where we can, have more time to focus on those things, like further kind of identify our values, our program goals. Where do we want to go? What is this going to look like, under this new kind of, transition and like new shift in a sense. And so it'll be important for us, hopefully. So, and hopefully we'll see a lot of progress from it. So.
Yeah, because I always just like I mean, again, it's different for you guys because of the UAA, so you have a little bit more time between games. But it always strikes me. I don't want to say your first year is almost like a wash because you have so little time. If you're being hired in June or later, right, it's just that much more difficult. And then once you're in season, you are just going breakneck speed throughout the season. And so I'm always it's not even a soccer question. That ends up being what I think about. Like, man, how hard is any job would be that way. But in this case, I just think it's probably got to be super difficult.
Yeah.
What's your recruiting like? Like you just run through the season. Now you're getting into spring.
Yeah.
What is your like recruiting like? Because that's definitely had to have shifted from what you experienced at Bethany. Like, how's that looking? How's it shaping up? Are you looking for anything in particular? Smart kids, but other than that,
yeah. I mean, I think we want to bring, I think in what we're looking for, I talked about like our technical ability. That's something we don't want to shift from or lose, but we definitely want a little bit more physicality and athleticism in that sense. I think in who we're recruiting right now, I think, there's certain positions that we want to have more depth in, especially like going forward. We need some people that are going to put more pressure on frame. I think we didn't at times, and that's why we got the results we did. I think at times we did, but then we didn't have somebody that has been used to kind of putting the team on their back and being that like main goal scorer. I think we had players step up in great ways this year, but I think we just need more depth there, and we need, we need a little bit more in that sense. So, our timeline, like we're still looking to fill a couple last spots for 25. I think that's something that probably a lot of other schools in our conference are not saying, and have probably been for a while, unless it's like one or two, you know what I mean? Yeah. But obviously, like Coach Ross and I sat down, and obviously we're like, we are definitely behind, but we don't want, and we're trying not to feel like the pressure of like we are behind though. So we didn't want to rush offers because we truly value that like player relationship that we get to know. We want to make sure, obviously, yes, you're checking all the athletic boxes, all the program boxes, but now you need to make sure that you're checking the, like the culture boxes in that sense. Yeah. So
big deal, big deal.
Because usually that's something that I think both him and I like really clicked on right away, is the fact of like what we value and like why we got into coaching. It was slightly different stories, but we had the same kind of, underlying like feelings with things as far as like how we want to structure a team, how we want to get to know our players and things like that. And so I think that aspect is so important. I think that's, again, like I'm super competitive. Like I want to win in everything I can do. Like I'll compete over the stupidest things that have no business competing over. So like, obviously, like I want to do that. We want to win championships here. I think, there's a lot left on the table from this first year that we're looking to continue to build upon. And so, we don't want to settle for less for next year. So we're looking for players that can help us not, settle for less, but we really want to make sure we're not just making sure we're bringing in impactful players. We want to bring in players that are going to make us a better team culture wise and fit that. And so that's super important for us. But meanwhile, we're still finishing up 25s, but now we know we need to not fall behind on 26s and kind of get there. So I think we're feeling it a little bit still, but it's, we got some camps coming up and things like that that'll help us. And, we're definitely going to hit the road. And I think, we're already like assessing, okay, like we went to these showcases this year. We didn't go to these showcases this year. Next year, it's got to change. So I think, obviously like we're, trial and error with some things that will hopefully have a little bit smooth, more smooth running with that next year and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, just keep going from one fire to the next,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Like,
Yep. Yeah, it never, that's the one thing in coaching, like no matter what the level is, it never
yeah,
stops,
it never.
it's just it's a different type of kid you're looking at. You're going to different events. Like I'm going to completely different events here than I would have gone at Bethany. Obviously like the club landscape has changed a lot, GA now partnering with MLS Next. So we'll see how that, changes, like things like that. So, that's naturally shifting anyways. And so we'll always be adapting to that.
And I'm sure the other schools in the UAA are just waiting for you to get caught up. Like,
Yeah, right. I'm sure
yeah.
they're all like keeping their
They're
fingers
all just
crossed
like,
for me, right?
don't worry, you take your time. We will wait until you're ready.
To be honest, it is a really good group, though. I
Yeah,
am lucky, I think, to be in a conference for the most part where they've been, there's some coaches that have been super, super welcoming to me. So,
yeah. You are the first UAA coach that I've had.
okay.
Like, so I will be reaching out to
Yeah.
more. Um, so if you drop a line, that would be
Yeah.
appreciated.
Yeah.
Hey, it's not so bad on the hot seat. That's all you got to tell them. Hey, one last question for
Yeah.
you. And this is a soccer question. This is whatever is front of mind to you, and I understand you're in the middle of a lot of different things. So I've been asking, in the soccer world, what is it that we are not talking about but should?
Ooh. Wow, that's a
This is the
really
hard.
good question. I was
Yeah.
not prepared for that.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah,
like
sorry.
that's when you don't want to just say something. Like it's
Yeah.
a meaningful question, something that we're not talking about that we should. Oh wow, I gotta really think about this one.
It's a good stump
I
question, you know?
do. I think one of the things that I don't know if this is like completely there because I do think there are people that are trying to talk about things a little bit more, and you always have those ones that are. But I know there's certain like accounts out there like Twitter, Instagram, social media.
Yep.
Um, I, I really just like that just promote certain levels or certain things like that.
Hmm.
Like I'm somebody that obviously like I played Division 1. I've
Hmm.
coached Division 2. I've coached Division 3, and I definitely think that like if I could go through the process again, I'd be curious, like with the knowledge I have today, if I would
Hmm.
choose the same or differently. Right.
Hmm.
At the end of the day, I think that path has gotten me to where I am, and I am grateful for that. So I don't want to choose
Yeah.
it in that sense, but it is interesting. And I think there are still a lot of programs and clubs and, social media people like out there that kind of just promote Division 1. But like
Hmm.
with this landscape changing so much with roster size and stuff like that,
Hmm.
I think it needs to shift at a quicker rate,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. And so, like, there are recruits that you talk to that are like, kind of look at you, but then they're like, if I get a D1 offer, I'm going to go there or I'm going to
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
that. And I think that's the biggest thing is to where there is still going to be a stigma between Division 2 and Division 3. That is like being somebody that has experience at all levels. When people talk to me about that and like you can tell they have a certain like thought in their back of their mind about what each level is, I'm kind of like, I don't think know
Yeah.
the landscape well enough. It would be cool to get like a lot more representation of Division 2, Division 3 like sports out there. Like
Hmm.
can we televise some? Can we not charge for all these websites to have to watch games? Or what can we do to, I think, further promote that? Because yeah, there are programs like I can tell you WashU will beat higher levels, higher level programs. So and we have a lot, probably almost anybody in our conference, top 25 teams, NESCAC schools, things like that. Like you have a lot of schools out there that can compete with almost, any level to a point, right? So I think that's something that would be a little bit cooler to maybe see a shift in that in some ways
Yeah.
through what we're seeing on social media, in the news, on TV,
Yeah.
live stream events.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Like seriously, it's the one thing I didn't think about that we should be talking about, but that is very true. I've always been like, oh, there's this D1 bust,
Yep.
D1 or bust thing, which is real. Um, but I, I was, I always, I've always said they're division, it's taking Division 3 because that's all I do is Division 3. Like your top, if you just said your top 50 teams, whoever they are,
Mhm.
you can compete in Division 1 without 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 sort of being rolled over by everybody, right?
Mhm.
Like, yeah, there might be, let's be real,
Yeah.
right? Top 10, top 15, like they're going to roll over everybody. They're just that unique. But I think everybody else, it is as equal can be.
Mhm.
Might be a little bit more competitive, size, speed, right? I totally get that, but I think it's the quality is so much
Mhm.
greater than what people give it credit for.
Yeah. And
And I
soccer,
think it's
you know.
being ushered, and I think they're
Yep.
doing the things to usher people. Hey, pick Division 3 instead of Division 1 because now we're going to make it even more difficult for you
Mhm.
to play Division 1.
Yeah,
But
and soccer is one of those sports, like you've seen it. You've dominated a game, and you
yeah,
lose 1-0, and you
yeah, yeah, yeah,
get those games in your career,
yeah.
right? I
Yep,
just think
yep,
because of how you score and like how few chances there are, and that it makes it a little bit more unique, where you can have that underdog upset people in moments
yep,
that you don't expect. So, yeah,
yep. Coach, this was fantastic. You are a gold mine of information. Really went down
I'm a
some
good yapper
interesting.
sometimes. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, it's appreciated. I like it.
yeah,
Seriously, you, you're in a unique position of being a new coach, the type of program, all that kind of stuff
hmm
that I found really
yeah,
fascinating. I will definitely have you on again when you're willing and able.
yeah, a
Just
little bit
before the
settled
season, I'll
into it.
ping you. Yeah, just to
Yeah,
get your impressions of what next year is going to look like. But
of
I do
course.
appreciate the time.
Yeah,
Wish you all the best. Obviously, I follow you guys
yeah,
pretty seriously. So,
yeah.
yeah, thank you very much.
No, thank you. It's great to, like I said, have somebody that's supportive of all levels, all teams. Obviously, the hat's a good one, so keep that
Yeah,
one maybe in the front of your
yeah.
large
My
collection. But
rotation, as
yeah,
I call
your
it,
large
right? Like,
collection. But yeah, anytime. It was great.
yeah. Thank you, and yeah, like I said, I'll be in touch. If you need
Awesome.
anything from me, just let me know.
Yeah,
All right.
I'll see
All
you
right.
then.
Thanks, Coach.
Take care.
Thank you.